Hi, my name is Samhita Mukhopadhyay. I'm a writer and the author of the newly released The Myth of Making It. And you are listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Yeah. My name is Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Hi, everyone. On this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, we share a conversation with the author of The Myth of Making It, Samhita Mukhopadhyay. Stay tuned. Whether it's small or big, all of us at some point in our lives hopefully feel the drive to achieve something. And speaking of achievement, thank you all once again for listening and watching Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, and for sharing this with your friends and family. Your support reminds everyone that conversation is truly the antidote to apathy, and if you're enjoying these, please share a kind rating and review, and follow along on social media and subscribe, as I'm really quite grateful. Okay, so for all of us, ambition and the shiny plateaus that we look at as goals along a professional journey have been curated and informed in an ongoing fashion by so many different factors. But how do those plateaus actually make us feel? And what if those feelings are unexpected and in fact confusing? What are the institutional and cultural forces that have shaped what these achievement vistas should look like? And why does this journey particularly feel so different for women? I've been thinking a lot about this as my own daughter has entered the workforce as a young professional and what this may feel like in 2024 and beyond. And so it was truly wonderful to share a conversation with Samhita Mukhopadhyay, author of the new book, The Myth of Making It, A Workplace Reckoning. Samhita grew up in New York and after getting her master's in women's and gender studies, began her professional career as a writer and a blogger, and soon was authoring books like Outdated, Why Dating is Ruining Your Love Life, and co-editing the anthology Nasty Women, Feminism, Resistance, and Revolution in Trump's America. She's written about her own very personal explorations around mental health and her weight journey, and her work has been featured in New York Magazine, The Cut, Vanity Fair, Vogue, The Atlantic, and The Nation. Samhita served as the executive editor of the popular blog Feministing, and then for Teen Vogue, and in reflecting on her journey, found herself squarely in the messy middle of it all, in being a girl boss, questioning the notion that happiness and fulfillment stem from overwork and professional achievement. In The Myth of Making It, Samhita questions hustle culture and the neoliberal feminist mantras of leaning in and persevering as seductive and often destructive definitions and methods. Through a blend of personal anecdotes, expert analysis, and the varied experiences of workers, she tackles this paradox of why working success for women can feel deeply important and so unsatisfying at the same time. Now, I've read the book, and it's a lot more than myth-busting, and both personally touching and methodically academic, with true resonance for everyone in the workforce, and really a call to action for a collective introspection on real support, redefining success, and community building. Samhita and I caught up to chat, and while we talked about a range of things from trickle-down feminism to being the daughter of 2 Bengali immigrants to mentoring and leadership, as a true optimist myself, I first asked her if at her core she had, fun in writing this book.
No, I wouldn't say I had fun writing it. I think that I had moments that were revelatory and that I enjoyed. Like I felt it was cathartic, and I felt successful in processing and expressing something fairly complex that I had gone through. And so there were moments that felt good, but in general, no. Like I wish I was one of those writers that has pleasure from writing, but I don't.
Right. Well, I mean, whether it's fun or at least this feeling of, I don't know about redemption, but, at the end, putting your thoughts out there and making sure that there was a product that people could digest, that definitely must have felt very rewarding in a way.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, listen, we don't write for the money, that's for sure. So it's
Like pediatrics.
yeah. So yeah, it's definitely, I mean, this is part of my journey, right? In terms of trying to
Yeah.
redefine what success is. it is rewarding. I think that I am still yearning for a level of success with this book that I wasn't expecting because I didn't know what I was expecting, right? Like things
Mm,
have changed so much in book publishing in the last 10 years. And the last book I put out was, what, 7 years ago, pre COVID, and things were really different then in terms of how much newsrooms covered books and how much we had tours. Like there's just so many things that have changed. And so I think
yeah.
I just wasn't sure what to expect. And so it has been a little bit like, it's like unbelievably rewarding that so many people are engaging with the book and they are finding meaning in it and they're seeing themselves in it. I mean, I think that has been an unbelievable experience. I think in terms of like traditional markers of success, like
Mm,
I don't necessarily know that I'm feeling those with this book. And I'm being really honest about, like, I've been starting to be really honest about that because I think that's a piece of what this book is. It's like, what was the ultimate purpose of me writing this? And that's something I've really had to sit with and be honest with myself about.
is that something that came as a surprise that you would be embracing the at least markers of this in unexpected ways? That you'd find joy perhaps in the different ways that people are appreciating the work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am so grateful for anyone that picks up anything that I write, and even more grateful that, somebody engages with it, or that they feel less alone when they read what I've written. And I mean, that's why I do it. I do it with
Yeah.
many people have asked me, they're like, what was the purpose of this book? And really, like, if I it wasn't to fix this problem, right? Like it wasn't to necessarily offer a solution, though I think people have found some solution in it. It was to really help people feel less alone in the questions they were asking. And so, yeah, I'm very grateful for that and I embrace that type of feedback. I don't think it's unusual that I had a desire to have some type of conventional approval. I think that when you're a person of color, I think that, as someone who isn't necessarily like, I didn't live up to the idea of the model minority, I have always had this love hate relationship with institutional recognition. And so,
Mm,
I'm always just like, I'll do it on my own. I have like a super punk rap, like Gen X ethic. But then at the end of the
yeah.
day, I also do want to be recognized because I do think my work is good. And so, I think that's that constant back and forth of like, do I actually need the stamp of approval to say that I am successful, and I feel like often as immigrants and as South Asians, I mean, it's like there are certain traditional markers of success that we are really beholden to. And it is this constant process of unpacking for me where I'm like, is this something that I authentically want, or is this something I believe I need because of the way I was raised?
Yeah, it is true that there's a lot of kind of backdrop there that's hard to, and baggage for that matter, that's hard to sort of unleash and get liberated from. When you emerged from the kind of writing and the editing part for this book, I'm guaranteeing that it must have felt liberating in many ways. But did you also emerge as someone who appreciated the actual opportunity more and felt maybe deserving of it a little more, especially given the topic material?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one thing that I definitely feel comfortable in the publication of this book and in the process of finishing it, and even getting a book deal from such a big house, is that I have done my time. I have a
Yeah.
almost 20-year career. I have a lot of experiences. I have a lot of challenging experiences that have forced me to confront bigger questions that I'm mid-career. I'm not at the end of my career. I'm not at the beginning of my career. I'm really in this place where I can look back the last 15, 20 years and say, okay, here are the things that have gone really well. Here are the things that I've really learned something from. And here's what I have to share in terms of wisdom as, more of like an auntie, not like a parent as much as like the older sister, auntie figure, which I really thought about a lot in writing this book because I think that I didn't work 20 years in one place. I didn't climb a corporate ladder in the traditional sense, but there was something that I realized in all of the decisions that I had made and all of the opportunities that I had had. I had learned things in all of those places. And I could at least share my process to understanding those things, no matter how vulnerable or how ugly it was. And I think the other was that it was really important to me to write something that felt real instead of, I think, what a lot of business books do, which is kind of gloss over and give you a bunch of can-do isms that are
Mm.
fine, and I think necessary for certain moments. But I also just wanted to be honest about how you can work as hard as you want and get to the thing that you think is your dream and realize that that's not the case, and what that process also looks like what failure actually feels like. And I think that was very liberating to put out there, because now it's out there, and now there is a type of vulnerability that I have been able to model that other people are now feeling inspired to model as well.
Not something you hear often, which is big sister or auntie vulnerability
Yeah.
coming out there. So, and I'm thinking about this even also from learning about some of the lessons, and maybe even not even the lessons is the right word here, but just even learning about the content and the material and the ease in which you write about all of this. I was thinking about this from a doctor's perspective, even sort of an infectious disease perspective, in that if hustle culture, how it thrives, and in a way, if hustle culture is the identified sort of predator, then who are its prey, and how are they susceptible to this kind of beast?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that we're all susceptible, right? Like, we are all susceptible to narratives around what we can personally do to overcome any obstacles that we face. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing either. Like, I think it's important for people to feel optimistic, to feel hopeful, to feel capable of overcoming obstacles, of accomplishing things. Like, I had to fundamentally believe that I could write a book, to sign a book deal and take on the task of writing a book. But I do think that we live in a workplace culture right now that banks on a type of scarcity, where we have convinced people that where you get in your life, where you get in your career, is fundamentally rooted in what you personally are capable of, with no recognition that you will experience sexism or racism or any other type of cultural experience in the workplace that could impact what your outcomes are going to be. And that, like, working mothers aren't left out of the boardroom because they haven't worked hard enough, or because they haven't, used the right time management software. That's not what's keeping them out. It's a institutional bias towards caretaking, and how we don't recognize and support women after they've expanded their families. And that statistically is what is leading to that. Doesn't mean as an individual woman there aren't decisions you can make personally to make your workload easier or to make it more effective, or all of those things. I don't think one takes away from the other, but I do think that we often get siloed into believing that we alone are to blame for whether we can overcome obstacles. And so I think in a lot of ways we're all victim to the possibility of hustle culture. And I don't think it's gender specific either. I think that one of the things I talk about in the book is that the roots of hustle culture was really about Black men who were designated as not willing to work hard enough to overcome the challenges of capitalism, without any recognition to the fact that this country's entire economic system is based on the unpaid labor of Black Americans, right? And enslaved Americans. So, I think that in many ways, like, we are all susceptible to a culture that convinces us that if we work hard enough, we can overcome any obstacle. And also that when somebody does not have the resources they need, when someone is poor, when someone doesn't have access, that is their fault. And we fundamentally believe that. We believe that unhoused people, it's their fault that they're unhoused. We believe that people that don't have as much money, don't have money to go on a family vacation, don't have money to have appropriate housing, we fundamentally believe that is their fault. That's because they didn't hustle hard enough. And that is, so in that way, I believe that, like, we're all susceptible to it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it pervades just about every sort of feeling of being marginalized, right? That, like, we don't give license for understanding all the structures behind it, and yet we're so quick to topically and in a way just embark blame. You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, let's come back to our conversation with Samhita Mukhopadhyay. Stay tuned. Conversation. It's the antidote to apathy and the catalyst for relationships. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians, so everyone can say, trust me, I know what I'm doing. New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and you are listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tam France.
Hey, this is Nimesh Patel.
Hi, my name is Richa Morjani, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing with Abhay Dandekar.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation with author Samhita Mukhopadhyay. You write so directly and, in fact, elegantly about trickle-down feminism. And I'm wondering that from a very sort of simplified and unelegant way for myself, it seems like just such this pyramidal model that idolizes a pinnacle. But so to reform and reframe a new structure, and again, I'm a very shape-oriented person, maybe as a sphere or this sort of happy blob, and bring power and agency back to the base. How do you build accelerators of trust and connection and help support that so that it doesn't have to constantly idolize some sort of apex?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that I really try to explore in the book is I do think this is both an internal and a collective reckoning that we really need to go through. We need to both kind of say to ourselves, like, what is enough? Like, what does it mean to be successful? What am I going to feel being successful? And like I said, I am fully transparent about the fact that I am working through these questions as we speak, right?
Yeah,
you know, a lot of this
course.
is, you know, they say you write the book that you need to read. And it's like, that is very true for me in
That's
this
it,
instance, right? Like, I really need to read my own book and take my own advice. And so I think there is this internal reckoning in terms of what does success look like? What does it mean to have enough? What does it mean to do enough? Is it okay to just put it down once in a while and be like, I don't have to be perfect at every single thing I do. I don't have to be successful. I don't have to girl boss my way through every single piece of, maybe I can just cook a meal. Maybe I don't need to start like a cooking meal franchise. You know, like I just feel like
Right.
we push ourselves for performance in this way that is so antithetical to living a balanced and happy life in so many ways. Like we try to optimize everything. So I think there's the internal reckoning, but I also think that there needs to be a collective reckoning in terms of how do we actually say, because I think that women are already expected to settle for less. We're already expected to say, like, that's enough. I don't need to get paid more. I don't need to, you know. And so us as individuals doing it, that's not enough. Like we really need to say collectively that what does it mean for a business to grow enough? What does it mean for a product to be successful enough? I mean, there's this viral video right now of the CEO of Arizona Iced Tea, and he's basically asked by this interviewer, like, why is your product still 99 cents? Like, the market's totally changed. You can clearly charge more money for this drink. And he is like, no, I have enough money. Like, I don't actually need to build my business on the backs of working people that can successfully and comfortably enjoy my drink. And I was like, that is such a model for the type of, I think, businesses and capitalism we really need to be thinking about. What does it actually mean to have enough? And I don't necessarily know, like, I think that for, look, I'm not an economist. Like, these are just me, like, let me just putting it out there. You know, I'm just putting it out there.
Why not?
They're thought experiments, right?
Yeah.
But I do think, you know, when you dovetail the idea of growing at all costs, growing no matter what, it's never enough. It's never enough. And you match that with a growing unhappy labor force, right? Most people don't like their jobs anymore. They don't want to go above and beyond. And there's no incentive to. It's like you're not paid enough to make sure that the product is perfect, right? And so how do we maximize that experience and not have it be just about the bottom line and not just have it be about how much can we exploit somebody until we burn through them and then we find another set of workers. And that's really the model that we're in right now. Like it's, you know, humans have somehow, human labor has basically become something that is considered expendable. And that is when the reality is every successful business that is also ethical, that is also creative, and that is also kind of doing the most exciting work understands that people power is actually your most important resource.
And they probably are very successful at understanding that kind of sweet spot of being enough, right? I mean, you know, there's a real calculation that doesn't have to be based upon a metric, but it's definitely sort of like this feel. And I'm not a business theory person either, but I can imagine because we face this in medicine, we face this everywhere, that making sure that your team and your individuals and your people power understand what that enough is. If you think about making it in fact as being this myth and something that does need sort of rapid individual and collective redesign, then I wonder if the answer is really building these concentric structures of support rather than this kind of linear effort that's time based, that's linked solely to these kind of like successive coronations. And you write actually very personally about your own college experience. I was just talking about, my daughter's college experience and what she's going through. So I'm wondering how you would either counsel women or those who are in college entering the workforce, or for that matter, even design a course on empowering women, not just from that, again, individual standpoint, but on the idea that it's an imperative to collectively organize around this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think that there is so much curriculum now around, I mean, I was a women's studies major. You're really starting to see now business schools are having coursework around the ethics of capitalism. I think that's really fascinating. I think that there are these kind of new models, and I do think Gen Z is like really spearheading a lot of this. I think when you look at, I always forget what it's called, but when people pool their resources to support each other, like it was happening
like
a lot.
Crowdsourcing.
Yeah, crowdsourcing and basically communities coming together and supporting each other, whether it's financially or with resources or education or tools, rides. I think all of those kind of coordinated efforts, like Gen Z has really been at the forefront of that because they are also sitting at the precipice of many of the infrastructure that leads to a healthy and successful society are crumbling in front of them, right? I mean, like we just had a big fight in New York because they didn't want to keep libraries open on the weekends, right? Like, I mean, it's like for funding reasons, I mean, our priorities are so backwards right now in terms of what we invest in. And so I do think that this bigger question of what do these institutions actually do for us? How are they not serving us is at the forefront. And I think that right now we're seeing, especially college students, seeing the importance of collective organizing more than I think. I mean, I went to college at the turn of the century, and it was definitely a moment where that was another moment of collective organizing, right? It was like the pre 9/11. I was a big student campus organizer, and we were having mass arrests, and I was arrested in like multiple places. But one of the biggest arrests I had was during the big World Trade Organization meetings in DC in 1999. And, and so this is like, I think 20 years later, I'm seeing some of the most revitalized student movements that we've seen in a really long time. And so I think that, but I think I think the question you're asking is a little bit more specific than that, because I think that it's really easy to get behind like, oh yeah, collective organizing is great, but how does that actually impact my day-to-day life? Like, how does that impact how I make decisions? Because at the end of the day, most college students today are going to have to go out into the workforce. They're going to have to find jobs, and they can't just be like, I'm a revolutionary. Like, that's not going to actually pay the bills, which is something that I detail quite extensively in the book, because I also thought that I was a revolutionary, and I was like, oh no, but I have to play the game in this really specific way.
Yeah.
And so I think like, one of the questions that I think a lot of people are asking, what does it mean to have collective ambition? Not just be like, I need to get ahead for myself, but to actually say that I'm values based and I want to do work that's impact driven, and I don't just want to be invested in the bottom line. And I think that that's a bigger question that a lot of people are asking right now. And statistically, younger generations are not interested in, while salary matters to them, they're actually just as invested in impact as they are in salaries. And I think that that is another reason why businesses really need to think about and take stock of, what does success look like? What does impact look like? And how do we kind of retain and sustain a workforce that feels that what they're doing has meaning? And I'm not saying like not everything you do in your life is going to feel purpose driven or meaningful. That's just like not the case. That's just not how life is. But the way that people feel so much right now that everything they do is bullshit, I think that there's like an opportunity there in terms of having people feel invested in what they're doing, no matter how little or big, whether you're working at McDonald's or whether you're working for the Cancer Society. Like, I think there are many ways that you can feel that your work is meaningful in some way.
Yeah, I mean, going back to sort of like drive and autonomy and purpose and feeling that you're part of a collective. Do you mentor people differently these days? Do you offer feedback differently? And particularly with this idea that it is a collective, when did you maybe recognize that you just couldn't tackle this kind of neoliberal feminism alone?
Yeah. So the second half of the book really gets into my experiences with management and kind of all of the different places where I started to realize that my work was not going to be effective unless I understood how to make it collectively meaningful. So yeah, I take management really seriously, and it's exhausting, right? Like I don't, but
Yeah.
I think it's really important to create environments and support and sustain environments that people feel engaged, they feel supported, they feel safe, they feel that they have a really clear sense of what their job description is, of where they're being impactful and where there are opportunities for growth. And I do think that one of the things that I'm really interested in is I think this middle band of people, or what the great Barbara Ehrenreich, the socialist feminist, called the professional managerial class. And that is really this
Mm.
middle band of people who are educated, who are not the owners of these businesses. They are the ones that are tasked with managing them, right? At the supervisor level. And what we're seeing in the last couple of years is that band of people that is historically like the snitches, right? Like they're the ones that tell on you to the boss, are actually becoming radicalized. And they are starting to
Mm.
realize that there is a tremendous opportunity with building with their employees, with building with their teams. And that is something that I'm really interested in. It's like, what does radical leadership look like in the context of neoliberal feminism, where we are
Mm.
incentivized to throw people under the bus? We're incentivized to be competitive. We're told that our individual progress is actually what is ultimately social progress, but we know that that is actually not true. And so that's something, and I think that's something that is starting to happen.
Yeah, and for that sort of mid-level manager, being a radical leader in that way, I'm imagining that you also have to have lots and lots of tethers and build great connections with those who are, hierarchically above you, and then those who are, part of this sort of like pink collar class of worker as well, and make sure that you sort of flatten that level of hierarchy a little bit too. Is that kind of call to action really based in policy work and making sure that the structures sort of change for everyone, for working moms, for those who are marginalized, for those who want to, in fact, scale radicalization, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. Many of the changes that need to happen in the workforce are not things that can happen at the individual level. Almost all of them are structural changes that need to occur, whether they be workplace policy, family leave, equal pay policy, anti discrimination work, diversity and inclusion processes and curriculum. I mean, almost all of the workplace things that we are facing right now require collective response and require collective action. So I think that, and that doesn't mean that the individual is somehow off the hook, but I think that rather than quiet quitting or just constantly being miserable, I think there's an opportunity for us to say, how do we take this ambition? How do we take this desire for change? How do we take this moment where people are so frustrated with work and turn that into something action oriented, turn that into, whether that's building relationships at work, organizing your workplace, educating yourself about different types of work that you want to be doing, being honest with yourself about why you're going into the industries you're going into. I think that to me is where we can put a lot of this energy. And that will ultimately lead to collective change. I mean, at the end of the day, collective change is many of us saying the same thing over and over together, right? And
Yeah.
so, how do we kind of do that? And that's something that I'm really hoping for and advocating for in the book.
You have the source of this with on the policy level, but is there a companion piece of this that absolutely requires capital? So for those venture people out there, for those who are really looking at the initial building blocks of new innovation, new tech, new companies, and even adding sort of like these boluses of capital into existing frameworks, maybe the capital has to be tethered with, radical action like this.
Absolutely. And we really need to like start focusing on quality over quantity, right? What
Yeah.
does it mean to have a successful business? What does it mean to invest in a business and have it grow? I mean, I have worked in multiple businesses where investment did not match the growth plan. And so there was this expectation to grow something that didn't have a clear vision, that didn't have a clear business idea or a growth model. So, what does it actually look like to grow smart and to grow slow? And to grow
Mm.
in a way that's effective and where you actually consider what people's capacities are and their ability to contribute and their ability to create. And up until this date, I have literally worked in environments where the expectation is that you work as much as possible for as little pay as possible. That's literally the modus
Right.
operandi. And that is right. And
Yeah.
that's the And that's true for so many businesses right now. And the ones that are starting to actually acknowledge and see this, you will see that they are successful in different ways, right? Like
Yeah.
they may not have the billionaire CEOs. Likely they don't, right? The CEOs take a pay cut in order for every single person that has a living wage to have on in their business. And so, and I talk about a couple of those examples in the book. One of them is the astrology platform Chani, right? Which is founded by Chani Nicholas. And, she's the co-CEO with Sonia Pasi. And they had a job description that went viral because everyone thought it was a joke, because they gave really amazing, it was a worker focused strategy. So they didn't pay anyone less than 80K no matter what their job is. They have a 4-day work week, they have unlimited vacation, they have domestic violence leave, they have 4 months maternity leave, they give people a small stipend so they can grow their wealth. All of these things that keep workers complacent and held down, they addressed. And that's I mean, and I think that most businesses would be too anxious to ever do something like that, but they have seen
Yeah.
tremendous profit. I mean, they have a subscription based business, but you get so much for that subscription. Like when you interact with their app, you can tell that everybody who's working on it loves what they're doing. It's done really well, it's done really impactfully. And so the proof is kind of in the pudding. And they've talked about it in interviews, how there has been a
Right.
direct relationship between how much they've invested in their staff and their profit margin. And so I think those are the types of models that are really exciting to me in terms of how we're moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, it brings a lot of optimism to know that there's ways to do this and in a way that kind of provides a lot of hope. You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, let's come back to our conversation with Samhita Mukhopadhyay. Stay tuned. Every story told is a lesson learned, and every lesson learned is a story waiting to be told. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi everyone, this is Chef Vikas Khanna. I am a chef, I am an author, filmmaker, documentarian, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Hi guys, I'm Indra Nui.
Hi, I'm Lily Singh.
Hi, this is Madhuri Dixit, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing with Abhay Dandekar.
Hi there, I'm Abhay Dandekar, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with the author of The Myth of Making It, Samhita Mukhopadhyay. I know you wrote a lot about this in the book. I kind of want you to put your daughter of 2 Bengali immigrant parents hat on now for a second. And just as there's a redefinition of success that needs to be had, and all these ideas of structures and policy, what have you had to perhaps unlearn about personal failure?
I mean, I personally, I had a pretty different path in terms of, like, I failed very early, like literally, like actually failed all my classes. And so I was like so far outside the narrative of what an Bengali immigrant South Asian child was supposed to be, right? Like I was a crappy student. I had trouble paying attention. I hung out with the riffraffs. Like I was smoking cigarettes at 15 years old. Like I was in a riot girl, like total wild child, right? Like the fact that I came around and was like the ultimate good immigrant daughter and like supported my parents financially later on is like, to this day, my mom's like the most unexpected rebrand over here.
Right.
So I had feelings of failure from a very early age because I was living proof of like the way that I had been living my life was considered a failure. And that, and one of the things I really explored through this process was how much those early feelings of failure allowed future bosses to exploit me, because I never felt like I was good enough. I always felt like I was a failure. And it really took me such a long time to be like, oh, wait, I have something really valuable to say. And I have something really valuable to contribute and offer in all of these environments. And people are getting this at a discounted rate. That's wild. But I didn't, because I had these really early feelings of failure. And I did fail. I mean, I wasn't a good student. I had really hard time getting into college. Like I had a really hard time graduating college. And I think that those were really formative experiences for me that now I can look back on and say those were gifts that allowed me the space to understand that that was not the end of my life. That was the beginning of my story. That was not the end of my story. But yeah, I mean, my parents put a lot of pressure on me, and they were really disappointed in me that I was not a successful student and that I did not go to, like, I mean, Ivy, like, forget Ivy. Like, we're talking like, am I even going to college was the bigger question, right? So, you know, it was something that forced me to face my real deeply internalized feelings of failure and how to overcome them, to now turn around and be like a model in the South Asian community of like, oh my God, she made it. And it's like, there's a part of me that's kind of like, yeah, I made it despite you, not because of you. Like, I just want to say that this was not because, like, nobody wanted anything to do with me when I was growing up. I was a bad kid, right? But now, you know, it's like, oh, like Sammy writes books, and it's like,
look at that, right?
I hold a grudge with everybody, so that's the good news.
And hopefully there's more peace with that as well.
Yeah.
I wonder if, given that backdrop and given your study and expertise, particularly in feminism and women's studies, is there a unique, almost empathy and a unique pride that comes with a South Asian modern feminism when you explore all the themes in the book, when you are actually diving in, when you're thinking about sort of unlearning everything that you've had to about failure and sort of like holding that grudge? Is there a lens of empathy and pride that's sort of unique to a South Asian feminism in writing this book?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that I have always had a very fraught relationship to my South Asian identity because I wasn't the model minority, because I didn't come from money, I didn't go to an Ivy League school. All of the stereotypes that have held us down, I believe, as a community, that we have kind of bought into this idea of our own excellence. And it's really problematic, right? Like, it's a really problematic ideology because most South Asians are probably struggling, could probably relate to my experience more than the one that's kind of been put forth as the model, right? And so I definitely think that a big part of my feminism is a recognition and an undoing of the shame of failure, and saying that, like, we have been built up and weaponized to make other minority groups feel less than because of our proximity to whiteness and our proximity to success and material success. I mean, we are the wealthiest of the Asian American groups, right? And what are we doing with that money? Sorry, what the fuck are we doing with that money? It just drives me crazy. The whole thing drives me crazy.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I do think that a big part of my feminism is calling truth to power in the South Asian community, as we are a growing, powerful segment of American society. How are we diversifying? How are we using our proximity to whiteness for good? How are we creating, you know, bridges between other communities of color? And I will be honest with you, I have not seen that in a way that I would like to.
Yeah.
If I'm totally honest. But that's not to say the work isn't happening and that there aren't people that are thinking very collectively and are thinking about our connection and link to other communities. But I do think that any type of South Asian American feminism really has to reckon with the ways that privilege impacts our access and proximity. And we can't just hide behind this neoliberal idea of like, oh, we're people of color. And so, you know, we have this universal understanding of our experience that other people of color do. We actually don't. We have a completely different experience. And, you know, and I think that that's when I really look to the writing of the South Asian feminists or people like Vijay Prashad, you know, and I think other South Asian writers that have, you know, my elders who have kind of been talking about this stuff for the last 20, 30 years, who frankly have been marginalized. We've been marginalized because the narrative that South Asians pulled themselves up with by their bootstraps, and that's why they're successful, is a very seductive one. It's a very seductive narrative. And, you know, and I am here to tell you, it is bullshit.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, understanding that there are some sparkles out there, that there are some places where there is a lot of thought and thoughtfulness, where utilizing that power and utilizing that capital and utilizing all of these things to be a force of good and make sure it spreads and scales. Hopefully there's some groundswell to that. I've enjoyed your articles on Ozempic and Manjaro and some of your work exploring dating, and now, of course, the myth of making it. And I'm just so curious. I mean, in all of these explorations and all the things even we're talking about, given identity and many of the interrogations that you're going through here, your writing seems to enjoy paradoxes and really kind of almost highlight them. And have you always felt comfortable in this to some degree, in this space, and even examining it or being keen on tackling some of these things? Or for that matter, like you said, has this just been a incredible iterative journey for you that builds that the dots keep connecting so that it can actually, shine brighter with each effort?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have always had a comfort with calling out hypocrisy and what I think are untenable standards that people are held to. Like from a really young age, I was like, I had really like strong criticisms about South Asian culture and gender dynamics in them, like really young, like 11, 12. Where I was just like, you're not going to arrange me into marriage. You're not going to do this. Like, if I have to do this, my brother has to do this too. Like, I am not going to work in the kitchen and my brother's not going to work in the kitchen. And if he gets to play outside, I get to play outside. Like, I have no idea where I got that from. Like, some of that I think is the Bengali tradition of like intellectualism and critique, but always very masculine, right? Like, I mean, there are amazing South Bengali feminists, but that's not the culture that I was growing up in. And so, and I do think that I experienced racism really young because I grew up, in the suburbs of New York City in the 80s. And so I was like one of a handful of people of color, like in the entire county probably. So I think I had a really strong reaction to that. I think later, because I studied women's studies and I was really interested in structural analysis, I think that has kind of woven its way through all of my work, where I'm always thinking about, I grew up on a steady diet of Gayatri Spivak and Judith Butler and Bell Hooks and Angela Davis and, the kind of structural feminists that were calling out the mechanisms in society that were producing certain types of experiences for us, or Kimberly Crenshaw, right? The godmother of intersectionality. So I think because I read that stuff really young, it impacted how I saw the world and my worldview, and I applied it to the way that I was looking at everything. And so,
including yourself, by the way, right? I mean, like your weight journey and all these things. I mean, it just seems like they manifest so beautifully in the way that you express.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and so I mean, going forward, then do paradoxes and how you actually tackle that, do they lead to, again, like we talked about in the beginning, like it's not necessarily the funnest process to go through, but when you explore them and when you actually find aha moments, have you heard that back from people who read your work that like, that was really important to explore that paradox and to explore some of these mechanisms to unpack that without there necessarily being a solution in mind?
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten a lot of feedback on diving into the messy in between, because I think that it's really easy to be overly theoretical about stuff and just be like, I think of the Ozempic case. It's like, it's inherently bad. It feeds diet culture. Weight loss is bad. We should never want to lose weight, right? Sure. That's one narrative. Then there's the other narrative that's like, we'll lose weight at all costs, no matter what. And I was like, well, I'm in the center of these two narratives because for me personally, weight has a connection to certain health outcomes. And those health outcomes, they're genetic. They are things that I need to be worried about. And so the work of disentangling this narrative that I had internalized, that like, love your body at any size, and all of which I think is really important work. And I think the medical industry, I mean, this as a doctor, has a lot to learn from the work of body positivity activists. Like what would it look like for a woman to approach her weight without the lens of self-hatred? Like that alone is like, to me, a revolutionary idea, right? And so how do you take what you understand theoretically to be true? We know we should love our bodies at every size. We know that we have been taught to hate ourselves based on our weight, with medical realities. And I think that's really hard work to do. And I think that's same with the workplace. It's like, how do you kind of take this theoretical understanding of, work is oppressive, I hate it, I don't want to do it, with like, I have to work to live. Like, these are not, like, these are all realities that we're all grappling with. And so I do think that like the core of my work is like finding that messy in between of like, yeah, we're a little bit of all of this. Like, we're all a little bit girl boss. We're all a little bit obsessed with diet culture. We're all navigating these narratives. And we also have to work to live. Some of us do have to lose weight. I mean, look, like, it's not fun. Like, I don't want to, like a lot of this isn't stuff I necessarily want to do, but it's a reality that I'm sitting in. And how do I kind of navigate that reality while understanding and holding these broader political ideals? And yeah, I do think that that's my brand. That is the core of my work. That is the messiness that I thrive in and also suffer because of myself. I mean, you started this interview asking if I enjoyed writing this book. It's like, none of this is that enjoyable. Having these realizations is not a particularly pleasurable experience, and sharing them in such a vulnerable way and not knowing how people are going to react to it, or if they're going to be like, oh, she overshared, or she did this, or she's saying she's saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
I think that has been a really, and then to then be like, oh, and like nobody cares and nobody's reviewing my book. And, like matching all of that together it's a tough place to sit.
And I mean, it is a tough place to sit. It is, a real like courageous thing to be vulnerable and try and get a very authentic vantage point of yourself out there, and it feels naked and it feels very, very open. And there's a lot for people to learn from that messy middle and from that sort of really kind of uncomfortable space. And you write about, things now in the workplace that embody that, right? Whether it's the workplace or dating, again, the weight journey, mental health. Is writing then and sharing that kind of open thought process, how people get tangled in some of these spaces. Is that writing the vehicle then for self-acceptance and building community to actually provide lifelines for more self-love, whether that's for you or for your readers?
I think it can be, absolutely. I think that taking space for self-reflection is the vehicle for all of this, right? Is to really stop and ask ourselves, why are we so beholden to these narratives? Why do we hate our bodies? Why do we hate our jobs? Like, I think stopping to ask ourselves rather than always pointing the blame at everything around us and saying that, like, what are all of the mechanisms that are at play is the opportunity. So like, whether that's journaling, whether that's writing, I don't think everyone's going to write books. I don't think, whatever that process might be, but I do think that mindfulness, that kind of self-reflection is a big part of this moment, is what we need to kind of move forward.
Well, I know people are appreciating that and finding self-love and hopefully more than anything else, discovering and rediscovering your work many times over. Samhita, what a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I hope we can visit with you again down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm glad we could make it happen. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much again, Samhita, and please check out The Myth of Making It, as it's available everywhere. If you're enjoying these, a big thanks for rating and reviewing and passing the word along to your friends and family about Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. A shout out to our courageous POTUS, and of course to the next POTUS in the Lotus. Till next time, I'm Abhay Dandekar.